Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. We're gonna learn about psychology today. Back with Professor Fee for another anthro lesson. All right, how you guys doing today? I hope you guys are healthy and safe. It's been another day. All right, today we're gonna talk about psychological anthropology. It's different than regular psychology because psychological anthropology studies group behavior and group personality. I know that sounds a little bit different because regular psychology studies individual behavior, individual cognition, individual behavior, right? We always study in the field of anthropology lots of people, culture, society, right? Let's start. I want you guys to follow from your concept sheets, all right? Get out your concept sheet, psychology and culture. All right, psychological anthropology, the very first concept, studies group personality and group behavior, all right? Personalities are just distinctive ways of feeling and thinking, okay? It's distinctive ways of feeling and thinking. All of you have a personality, but we also have like a group personality. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. All right, cross-cultural psychologists study two or more societies. They study two or more societies. Every time you hear cross-cultural, they have to analyze two or more, all right? Forget about the next concepts there, the 4 questions, we're gonna go past that. The next one is Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead was really one of the creators and she laid the foundation for psychological anthropology. She was actually a student of Franz Boas, who's considered to be the father of American anthropology. Margaret Mead did a lot within the field, right? There's been a lot of debate about her in recent times, but she focused on and she was fascinated with Samoan culture, okay? And she wrote a lot of different ethnographies. One of the ones she wrote was Growing Up in Samoa. And growing up in Samoa, she wanted to analyze adolescent behavior. And what she did is she said, as a group, the Samoan people were passive and they were gentle and they had a communal identity, right? She said, so when she analyzed growing up in Samoa, she says, during times of adolescence, she said, they had no resistance toward their parents. They had no aggression toward their parents, right? They didn't have times of trial and tribulation. She says, but if we compare it with American adolescents, she says, they're fraught with resistance. They're fraught with turbulence against their parents, right? They're fraught, with sort of this anger during times of adolescence, right? So they resist. She says, but it wasn't that she had this bad thing against American, culture. She just said, at a very young age, Americans are fraught with a lot of responsibilities, right? We go to school, we have to do all these chores. She says, we have an individual personality. We don't have a communal identity. If something doesn't get done, somebody else in the group isn't really gonna get it done for us, right? We're individual, right? And that's how we adapt. So it wasn't so much she was doing a bad analysis, she was trying to compare sort of adolescent behavior and development. And she says, because of the group identity, right? Samoans wouldn't resist. That's just it. And because of ours, because we're at a very early age, right? We're individual, we're sort of instilled with that kind of personality development that it then will, come back later on in life as we're adolescents, and then we're gonna resist. All right. She did a lot. She had a lot. The book is called Growing Up in Samoa, and you guys, the ethnography, and you guys could, Google that, do a little bit more research. But that's it when we talk about group personality. Malinowski, the next term, is really considered to be sort of the father of British anthropology. Why is he here? Because he doubted and sort of hated Freud's analysis. He did not like the Oedipus complex. All of you know about sort of this Oedipus complex, right? That, Oedipus is this sort of approach where, he has sexual desires for the mother, but he doesn't act on them because of retaliation by the father, right? Malinowski said, ugh, that was a crock. He said, nah. He says, I don't believe that. And he said that if you look at field work and you look at societies that aren't constructed like a nuclear society, he says, sometimes the Oedipus complex just won't come into fruition. If you look at societies like matrilineal societies, maybe where sons grow up, with their uncles being the authority figure, is that going to create the Oedipus complex? So he really questioned a lot of that. And Freud was the creator. He's the father of psychology, right? So Freud is the one who created the Oedipal complex, the id, the ego, and all of these different kinds of terms that came out of the field of psychology, right? So just to sort of give you a little bit of background, Malinowski did not like Freud. He sort of hated all of Freud's ideologies and all his stuff of, sexual identity and things like that. All right, good. Conservation is the next term. And what conservation really is it's a way of thinking between the ages of 7 and 11, where you acquire sort of mathematical concepts of quantity and volume, right, and weight. So a 7-year-old would know they can't come in this room and pick me up, right? That it's these kinds of things that we acquire, especially in the United States where education is valued, right? Conservation becomes a main concept. Reversibility is another term that we talk about in these kinds of areas, and it's basically being able to put things back together again. Some of you guys like to build puzzles, take them apart, put them together again. That's reversibility. All right, good. Why do societies differ in personalities? Well, there's different things, right? One can be genetics. One is in the enculturation process that we talked about several times over the course of the semester. And the other one is socialization, that we talked a lot about, right, already, socialization. Those three things can be the foundation of what creates and what's gonna have differences within personality. All right, moving on. Let's get to conventional versus non-industrial societies. Basically, what we're really talking about in that little section is they took a study in California where they looked at the difference between like communal societies and individual societies, okay? And they looked at things like breastfeeding, cohabitation where the child sleeps in your bedroom, right? They looked at how long we hold a child. One of the things that they were talking about is in industrial society, because we value things like independence and individualism, we breastfeed for a short amount of time. We don't hold our babies for an amount of time. A matter of fact, we create a lot of contraptions so we don't have to hold them. Swings and rockers, right? And bassinets, right? And slings. And we have all these things so we actually don't have to have them so that they could create individualism and independence already, right? Also cohabitation, that, it's something that's not highly valued, right, in industrial societies, right? That kids are taught to really go in their room as early as they can to create that separation, right, and that individual adaptation. For non-industrial societies, they hold their children for a very long time, right? They want communalism and a communal identity. They breastfeed. Some of you guys have heard some of these societies breastfeed for a long time because they need to. Right? Because they want to save their children. The children need the nutrients from breast milk, right? So they breastfeed for a long amount of time, right? They hold their babies on command. All of these are part of what's creating that communal identity, right? All right, good. The next concept, socialization, right? We talk about socialization. We talked about that, remember, on the chapter on sex and gender. We talked about how do we socialize, masculinity and femininity. We talked about things like toy assignment. We talked about like Toys R Us and what boys get and girls get. We talked about, how parents speak to, little boys and little girls. Colors, blue and pink, right? We talked about that. Socialization is really some of these concepts, these ideas that we give to our children by parents, by people in authority. And we start to basically give them ideas about how to culturally conform, right? And we do these kinds of things to try to get the people that we want to have, right? We try to socialize them, right? Socialization is also a term. These are all in your book, in the glossary as well, and within the chapter. All right, good. All right. The next one, turn your concept sheet over to the Alaris people. The Alaris live in the island of Alor in Indonesia. And Rotner did his ethnographic study on them. He was sort of fascinated with the Alaris because he felt like they rejected their children, right? But in essence, the Alaris people, they live in this small island. The mothers and fathers are both primary subsisters, so they both have to work outside. So after a mother gives birth, right, she leaves to be a primary subsister. So the children, the infants go around the community. So one of the things that Rotner said is that The Allery's personality as a group, they're hostile, they're aggressive, right? They're suspicious, right? They're antagonistic, right? They're indifferent. They sort of had all of these sort of negative traits. And he says he believes this is due because at an early age during infancy, they're orally frustrated, they're orally deprived, right? That the mothers and the fathers leave right away, so they're not getting that maternal love. So in essence, he said they feel rejected, right? So one of the things that they talk about here is, why do parents reject? And Rotner has a lot of theories behind it, but one of his main theories is that parents reject because they don't get time away from the child, right? They don't have leisure time. And within that, it can create that frustration, and thus they can reject. He talks about a lot of ideas about parental rejection. That was just sort of one of his main concepts. All right, we're gonna skip the next few items, and we're gonna go all the way down to individualism versus collectivism. We've been talking about that whole time, individualistic, and that at an early age, we start to create ideas of individualism versus collectivism. Individualism would be our society, right? Going to school, being separated early, moving out, living in neo-local households, nuclear households. Collectivism, marrying and staying within your society, caring. It's sort of like coming together as the community. You sort of stay within that communal identity. Yourself isn't something that's valued. It's the community identity, right? The last concept on this chapter was ethno theories. And an ethno theory is basically, even if you don't want to have children, because some of you aren't going to want to have children, but even if you don't, the ethno theory is sort of the kinds of children that you want to have. So you want certain personality traits. For example, let's say I want my children to be honorable, and I want them to be kind, and I want them to be loving. So we're going to then instill certain things to get those kinds of behaviors. So let's say I want a child who's respectful. I may teach them manners at an early age. That we all have an ethno theory. We all have an idea about the kinds of children we would like to have. So we have these kinds of things that we do to get them. We socialize them, right, to acquire certain traits. That's psychology and culture, right? Make sure you like and subscribe, especially if you're in my anthro classes. All right, I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy.